Okay, I'm pleased to call on my longtime friend, my old friend. I have to be careful sometimes about saying old, but I mean longtime friend, Bryan Tramont, whom I asked to introduce our lunch speaker. So I'll just say, without anything else, I'm delighted that Russ Hanser is here, and I'm going to ask Bryan to introduce him. Then we're going to hear from Russ for about 10 minutes, and then I've asked Bob Branson, president of MMTC, to give some brief reactions, or say whatever in the heck that Bob wants to, whatever he wants to say for 4 or 5 minutes. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations on a great conference. It's always wonderful to be with Free State. It is an honor also to introduce my good friend, Russ Hanser. And sure, you all know him from his prolific and insightful commentary on Facebook. You might also know him as a trailblazer with remote work. He spent more time at Panera than any other human being I've ever known. But I'm here to talk about Russ as a leader at NTIA. From the resume perspective, Amherst, Harvard Law, First Circuit clerk. He spent a couple years at the FCC where he established himself as a leader in our space. We used to give out game balls for remarkable accomplishment under Michael's leadership. Russ got numerous of them for his extraordinary service to the country at the FCC. And then he joined me at Wilkinson Barker for 15 years. And much to my disappointment at some level, but excitement for the American people, he chose to go and join government, where he has been for the last 10 months doing extraordinary work at NTIA. Throughout that time, as a public servant and in private practice, Russ really established himself as a problem solver and as somebody who brought people along with remarkable intellect and skill. 2 other components of Russ: he has a ravenous intellect. If you'd like any book recommendations, the man has read virtually everything, I think, that's been published, and is always readily available to talk about those things. In fact, he is so intellectually curious that even during his tenure at the firm, he decided it'd be fun to go off while running a successful practice and get a graduate degree. Sure, let's go get another degree. In addition to all of that, he's also an extraordinarily committed to his community. So whether it's working on the board of Bike Back, which stresses digital connectivity, or his work at Azadi, I got it right, okay, which is a project that helps refugee women connect digitally. Russ cares deeply about the people he serves, both in his community and at NTIA. So it is my honor to introduce a problem solver, a ravenous intellect, and a compassionate leader, my friend Russ Hanser.
Should have left the firm a lot earlier. So thank you very much, Bryan, for that great introduction. Thank you, Randy, and to the Free State Foundation for having me today. It is really great to be here. I want to start off by just passing on regrets from NTI's administrator, Alan Davidson, and Deputy Administrator April McLean-Delaney for being unable to make it. They both asked me to send their regrets and to pass on that they really do look forward to coming to future events at Free State Foundation. So I am not Alan Davidson or April McLean-Delaney. Get that out of the way. I am Russ Hanser. As you've heard, I'm Director of Communications Policy Initiatives at NTIA in the Office of Policy Analysis and Development, OPAD. We have lots of big acronyms, as does the FCC. So I joined, as you heard, I joined NTA last August, and it's been a truly amazing ride. I wanted to start by talking about what an extraordinary time this is for NTIA as an institution. NTIA has been important for many, many years, but things have coalesced in a way that have really, I think, put us in the center of a lot of great, exciting issues. So I'll talk in a moment about the massive broadband funding programs that I've been working on and many others have been working on. But first I want to talk about some other things. As you may know, NTIA has a very broad remit, and among other things, we serve as the President's statutorily designated advisor on telecom and information policy issues. And we take that job really seriously, and there has probably been no time when that portfolio has been as broad or as important, active and important as it is today. So I wanted to talk just about a couple of the items, the big items on that agenda. One of our big areas is internet policy. And there, again, we have a broad range of work streams going on. I'm going to just list a few of them, but the issues we're working on now include platform and internet governance. They include the intersection of privacy, equity, and civil rights. And they include things like competition in the mobile app ecosystem. That's a topic on which we are currently seeking public comment. Side note on that, the comments are due May 23rd, and you can find the request for comment on our website. And all you private practice people, make sure your clients know so you can write their comments. With respect to spectrum policy, NTIA plays an important role as both the manager of federal spectrum use and as the advisor to the president. We represent the views of the executive branch on spectrum policy matters before both the FCC and Congress. And among our key priorities there, NTIA is working now with the FCC and other stakeholders to share or repurpose spectrum for the continued rollout of 5G and for planning for 6G services. At the same time, we're working to make sure that federal agencies themselves have the spectrum that they need for critical missions, including homeland security, national defense, climate monitoring, space exploration, scientific discovery, and others. NTIA is also working at this time with the FCC, I should say, to improve spectrum coordination and guiding the international preparation for next year's ITU World Radio Conference, WORC 23. Next, I want to note NTIA plays a critical role in network security and supply chain issues. On the cyber front, we are always working to advance consensus-based risk management frameworks that protect our networks and our data while promoting the digital economy itself and maintaining the benefits of the internet. One of our key initiatives there is the Communication Supply Chain Risk Information Partnership, CSCRIP for short. CSCRIP, as you may know, works to ensure that small and rural communications providers and vendors have access to the information that they need about cybersecurity and supply chain risks. We're also heavily involved in what used to be called the Team Telecom process. In that context, we work with other agencies to assess what risks, if any, are posed by foreign ownership interests in U.S. communications networks. And we are tasked with presenting the executive branch's collective proposals to mitigate those risks to the FCC. NTIA is also focused on issues posed by emerging technologies, such as AI, algorithmic bias, the privacy implications of quantum computing, and things like the use of emerging communications platforms by terrorist and criminal groups. In these areas, we engage very closely with partners throughout the federal government. Again, I joined NTIA in August, and literally, in my first month, I interfaced with more three-letter agencies than I had ever done in my 20 or so odd year career to that time, some of which I had never heard of before, and that continues. We are, coordinating throughout the federal government is a huge part of what we do, especially in that field. So, and then there's our robust work in the international sphere. NTIA is extremely active in international bodies, international fora. Some of them include, the list is too long to state in full, but ICANN, the ITU, APEC, OECD, and many others. In those fora, we advocate the U.S.'s positions in favor of internet freedom, evidence-based standard setting, responsible AI. We're working with partners around the world to promote 5G supplier diversity, including through open radio access networks, Open RAN. And we work with our allies and partners in the wider multi-stakeholder community to support an open, free, global, interoperable, reliable, and secure internet for all. So that's a bit of a rundown, but I've saved for last the area that's been nearest and dearest to my heart and to my tired typing fingers for the better part of the last year, and that is broadband. So even before the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed last November, Congress had given to NTIA many, many dollars to distribute to promote broadband objectives. And my colleagues have been working for months to implement those programs. So they've been work designing and implementing the Broadband Infrastructure Program, which we call BIP. That funds public-private partnerships deploying broadband mostly in rural areas. And also the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, TBCP, which works to, surprisingly, fund broadband deployment, planning, use, and adoption on tribal lands. Just 2 days ago, on Wednesday, we announced that we had issued a new round of $77 million in broadband grants to tribes in 10 states. But my work has focused on the new programs that have been instituted by the bipartisan infrastructure law. For the past 7 months or so, I've been leading the policy team that's been developing the $42.5 billion BEAD program, that's Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, the $1 billion Middle Mile Infrastructure Program, and then the suite of programs created by the Digital Equity Act, which together will comprise $2.75 billion in funding. So we're going to be rolling these 3 programs out, or the middle mile, the BEAD, and the first phase of the digital equity program, the planning phase of that program. We're going to be rolling those out in just over 1 week. We're going to be putting out materials, notices of funding opportunity, NOFOs in our lingo, and they're going to provide a lot of detail about how those programs are going to work. And for reasons you'll understand, I can't go into great detail, that's not public yet, but I want to assure you all personally that these programs have been given a huge amount of attention within NTIA, within the broader Commerce Department, and really throughout the executive branch. Assistant Secretary Davidson spends a great deal of his time focused on this topic. I'm talking with Alan every day. It's a great part of my job. Secretary Raimondo has also been giving a huge amount of attention to those issues. I've had numerous conversations with her and gotten to hear about her priorities for these programs as well. Beyond the leadership, it's just a large team comprised of really, really smart, really, really dedicated public servants who care deeply about closing the digital divide and getting this right. So I want to stress that these programs have a kind of a singular central aim, which is to close the digital divide and ensure tech equity for all Americans. And we mean all Americans, no matter their zip code, no matter their income, their race or ethnicity, their age, what language they speak, their medical status, anything else. Connecting the unconnected to affordable, high-speed internet equalizes economic and educational opportunities across America. If there's one takeaway you get from me, that should be it. That's our goal, and that's what you're going to see when we publish the NOFOs in just over a week. Secretary Raimondo frequently lists innovation and equity as some of her highest priorities, and Administrator Davidson also has publicly stated that equity is the beating heart of the programs we're developing. I agree with that, and not just because I work for them. The commitment to equity of access and opportunity has informed our entire process for the last 7 months, and it will continue to do so. We've known for a long time, and the pandemic confirmed, but again, we've known since before the pandemic, that high-speed internet connectivity is necessary predicate to full participation in American life. That means that every American needs access to reliable and affordable high-speed internet and the ability to make use of it. So the 3 new programs that I mentioned will work together to meet those goals and those needs. When we're through, we expect that every location in need of high-speed broadband, for the telecom geeks, which I think is most of you, that means every serviceable location on the FCC's fabric will have high-speed broadband. And we also expect that through a combination of federal, state, and territorial efforts, there will be affordable broadband options for all Americans. And again here, by all, I mean all, not only the low-income Americans who are eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program, but also middle-class Americans as well. The BEAD program's support for deployment of last-mile connectivity and its low-cost plan requirement are going to help with that. The middle mile program is going to help too by funding deployment of new links, new middle mile links that we expect will address broadband pain points that have been keeping prices too high. And we expect that the states and territories are also going to be coming up, we're going to be requiring them, in fact, to come up with innovative approaches of their own to help ensure affordability for their residents. But that's not all. Affordability is critically important, but we know that there are persistent equity gaps that are about more than the price of a subscription. And so we expect that money from the BEAD program and the digital equity programs will be used to address those gaps. We expect that some states and territories will create digital inclusion tools to help get the elderly online and provide resources for those who don't speak English as a first language. We expect funds to be used to address the unique needs of veterans and of rural residents, and we're going to demand aggressive outreach by states and territories to historically marginalized racial and ethnic groups, tribes, and others who have been deprived of opportunity by their limited ability to access the internet. And we expect we'll see some states and territories implement subsidy programs and other strategies to help low-income consumers acquire the devices they need to access the internet. We can only achieve digital equity when we address access, affordability, and the unique needs of these communities that have been left behind. So because this is the Free State Foundation's annual conference, I also want to emphasize that in our effort to achieve these goals, we are working hard to harness competitive market forces. We believe in those forces. The infrastructure law directs us to ensure build-out to locations that lack reliable access to broadband at 100 megabytes down and 20 megabytes up, megabits up. And in many or all cases, the networks that we fund are going to be the only networks that are providing service at that level or above. That's the way Congress designed the program. So that says something about what kind of retail competition we can expect, at least in the short term, with respect to these networks. But we still believe we can harness market forces here by requiring the would-be providers to compete for the funding in the first instance. The states and territories are going to have a good deal of leeway in how they design their own project selection processes, but we expect to provide some really important ground rules there. When selecting who's going to serve in a given location or set of locations, states and territories are going to have to consider the kinds of things that are important to consumers and the public interest, the kind of things that market competition produces when it exists and when it is functioning well. So even if providers won't have on-the-ground competitors, we want them to compete on these dimensions to the extent we can during the selection process, and we believe that's an important piece of our strategy in closing the digital divide. Again, you'll see more detail on this when the NOFOs get released in just over a week. So I could talk for hours about broadband programs, and I assure you I have talked for many, many hours about these broadband programs in recent months. But in closing, I want to pull back the lens a little bit. I joined NTIA at an incredibly fortuitous time for me and for the agency. We find ourselves really smack in the middle of issues that are defining American life. Every issue I heard discussed in the last panel, I thought we have some equity in that issue, and that's really exciting. So we have a new administrator who, to use a very technical term, is pumped to keep working on these issues. I want to emphasize we're not regulators. We succeed based on the quality of our ideas, the skill with which we execute, and our ability to work well with others. And we want you all to be part of that work. Your companies, your clients, your associations, your organizations, your stakeholders. So we invite you to come in and speak with us about what's on your mind. We want you to come help us develop and advance policies for our times. And we look forward to hearing from you. So thank you all for being here and for hearing me out, and thanks to the Free State Foundation for having me.
Russ, thanks so much. I can tell that you're appropriately pumped, and that's a good thing because you've got a lot of important work on your plate there under the leadership of Administrator Alan Davidson and his team, and we're grateful that you came today to lay that out for us. You know, I was sort of thinking maybe if it were a week later, we would have had your latest guidance, but it's an ongoing process. The responsibilities, particularly to manage the disbursement of all of these funds that you have, in addition to your other responsibilities that you alluded to. So we look forward to being able to continue the conversation with you, Alan Davidson, and others in the months ahead. So thank you. Now I'm going to do something I didn't have a chance to do it at the last session, but we have a tradition at the Free State Foundation of asking whether there are questions. I try and maintain that when we can. And in a moment, I'm going to get to my friend Bob Branson. But if we have any questions, and if they are indeed a question and a brief one, instead of a statement, I'd like to recognize that, and especially if there are any. One of the deans of the press corps is my friend Lynn Stanton here. I don't know whether she has one or not. Okay, now that I answered. So with that, Rick Lane, and then I saw Rick Simmerman. I think two Ricks, and remember, I'd like quick questions, and Russ, if you'd be amenable to answering.
Sure. Thank you for a great speech. I love what NTIA is doing. One of the areas I've been working on for 4 years is the who is issue and the impact that GDPR has had on our national cybersecurity and consumer protection. NTIA in the past has said that they are working with ICANN to fix the dark who is problem, yet the ICANN CEO said about a month ago that ICANN cannot fix the problem, that only legislation can. When is NTIA going to tell Congress that this problem cannot be fixed? The who is remains dark, and until Congress steps up, it's going to remain dark, and consumers and our national security is going to be at risk. Thank you.
Do you want to step up here. Okay.
Hello, hello. Oh, there we go. Okay. So thank you for the question. I'm going to be very blunt up front and say this is not an issue I work on, and anything I say about it on the substance and on the merits would be useless. So useless to you. But I do want to say a couple of things about that. Point one, the internet policy work, which is one of the spheres in which the question you raised comes up, is being handled by, I'm biased because they're in the office I'm in, but I think one of the strongest teams in NTIA, and they are working hard to take work that has been done in the last 10 to 15 years, but I think especially a lot of the multi-stakeholder work that was done in the Obama era, and move it forward into new frontiers. And the team there is really great. The other team that I think works on, would probably be working most on this issue is the Office of International Affairs. Also, excellent, smart group. Both of our groups, I think, have been focused in the last, since I've come to NTIA, focused on questions that balance kind of the security interests of all Americans, of the national security and law enforcement agencies and all Americans, with the just the need to have a free and open internet that we can harness for social, economic, and other purposes. And there are tough choices in that debate that are being very actively considered. What I would ultimately say is, by all means, come on in, have a meeting with those people, see if Alan will have a meeting on it, have other people do that. If you don't know who to reach out to, email me, and I'll get you the right people.
Thank
Rick,
you, and
Rick,
I asked Alan for
Rick,
a meeting. So
you're going to have to forego, and I have Rick Simmerman.
Sure, thanks,
now,
Randy,
another
and
Rick.
thank you, Russ, for all of your efforts in NTIA. We are equally as pumped. Question, given your hand in the NOFO, I'm sure they will be masterpieces. But if I understand correctly, NTIA is not subject to APA. So the question is, once they come out, to the extent there might be a need for clarification or further extension, I think Treasury's been doing FAQs. What is the process, to the extent anything needs to happen post-NOFO?
Great question. So just on your legal point, because this is not a rulemaking, there's no APA rulemaking requirements. I wouldn't say the APA doesn't apply to NTA as a whole, but on the BEAD program, there's an exemption, there's for now anyway, an exemption in the BEAD, from APA in the BEAD program. But what you're talking about is something that is probably as much work has gone into what I'm about to talk about and what your question goes to as the NOFOs themselves, and that is this extraordinarily robust program of technical assistance that has been in progress and is really only just getting started. So we are going to be issuing a huge amount of FAQs, summaries, webinars, one-on-one discussions with different kinds of stakeholder groups. The Act requires us to engage in what's called technical assistance, and technical assistance, I've learned since arriving, is really in the blood of NTIA, and we expect that the NOFO will say a lot of things. I'm not going to claim it's a masterpiece, but it will say a lot of things, and but it'll only be the tip of the iceberg on some issues because there'll be so much detail people will want, and we are ready to provide that, and we are preparing as we speak and have been for the last few months. There's an entire team led by one of the three principal drafters of the NOFO that is doing technical assistance, and it's just a big part of what we do is to do the interfacing. So there's going to be lots and lots of opportunity to make sure that everyone from your big members to much smaller providers to consumers, et cetera, have opportunities to talk and learn what they need to learn.
Did we say what the NOFO stood for? We probably did, and I probably drifted, but maybe just one more
I'll say one more time. NOFO is Notice of Funding Opportunity.
Okay, well, that'll catch people's attention, I guess, when you put it that way. Okay, now it's my pleasure, really, to introduce Robert Branson to just give some, as I said earlier, reactions to what Russ said, or really, he's an old friend in the same sense that I said that Bryan Tramont was old, and by that, I mean a long-time friend. I've known Bob for a long time. You have a brochure, and you can take a look at all the important positions that he's held in the past, but his current position is the important one of being president and CEO of the MMTC, which stands for Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, and many conferences in the past. I've been pleased to have the leader of that organization speak to us, because that's an important perspective to be heard as well. So I'm going to ask Bob if you could just take 4 or 5 minutes before we have lunch, please.
Thank you very much, Randy. I recognize I'm between you and lunch, so I'll make these remarks real quick, but I also have to make sure I thank Russ for his remarks. Russ and I haven't been as long as friends as you and I, but I still consider him and Bryan as well as being very close friends. And the programs that Russ talked about, you know, my organization has been very much steeped involved in, and we also have been involved in FCC's program on the CEDC. I'm a member of that committee. And so what we started last year was a program called Black Churches for Broadband, which we used to push to have the emergency broadband benefit made more permanent, which it has done. So we have transitioned from that, and this year we have a program called Black Churches for Digital Equity. Now, let me make very clear from the beginning, it's Black churches because that's where our background is, and many of us who are doing the program. We don't want to be exclusive. There are any other faith religions that want to do this. Faith-based is fine. What we wanted, though, was to have boots on the ground, people who can work in the communities and who can spread the word, because you can build it, but you got to make them come. And so that's what we're trying to do, and we think that faith-based leaders are more trusted. No offense to politicians, but they're more trusted in the communities than your average politician. So we wanted to go to them. What we bring when MMTC is that we have relationships to the people in Washington, like Russ and others at NTIA and FCC. So we bring the two parties together. We have at least 25 faith-based leaders that we have meeting once a month to learn what's going on, and we're urging them to join task force in their local and state communities, and also to push to become anchor institutions, and to try to help close the digital divide. I told you I'd be quick. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I appreciate you being here to say it, and I look forward not only to Russ being with us in the future, but Bob, of course, you or your colleagues, and Bryan, thank you for being here as well. Before you guys were even in the room, probably, or perhaps when we got started this morning, I said, wow, look around, and I'm pretty confident that you people in the audience probably haven't seen so many of your friends together in one place since the last time we were here for an annual conference, March 10th, 2020. We were here. We had a large crowd, of course. That evening, things began to shut down in D.C. 2 days later, it was pretty much completely shut down. But I'm really happy. It makes me feel good to see all of you here. And I hope you also enjoy having a chance to be with your friends. And I hope you also enjoy that buffet. I'm going to say voila, and sometime shortly after that, that screen is going to be pulled back, and we're going to have a buffet. And around 1 o'clock, we're going to start sometime right around 1 with the a panel with the FTC commissioners, former acting chair of the FTC, moderating, and there's an awful lot that's going on that's important regarding competition, consumers, that they're going to be talking about. So with that, let's have lunch. Thank you.